by going abroad, I actually opened the doors to what I was eventually to do to have a good career in the World Bank.
Hi, and welcome to my channel. I'm Cecile, and this is From Canada to Adana. Today, I'm really excited to bring you an uncle of mine, Alexander Keyserlingk. He is coming to us from Florida, but he has been around the globe. Um, we talk about so many things. We talk about how he got started as an expat, how his expat journey ended. We talk about the benefits it had for his then young children. And now that they're fully grown, of course, he has great perspective on what it added to their lives. We even talk about the difference between expats and immigrants, at least insofar as they can be close. Anyway, there was so much that we talked about. I really had trouble distilling it down into just, this short video that you see in front of you today. Enjoy.
Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And where are you now?
Yeah, I was born in Montreal, in Canada. I went to school the first 6 years of my life in the English system, because English was spoken in my house. My parents spoke German to each other, but we did not want to learn German. So the English was the language of the house. But my father at that time, and we're talking 1960s, early 60s, decided that I should learn French. So when I finished sixth grade, he declared to me that I was now going to a French-speaking boarding school and not speaking a word of French. That was kind of a shock. But it was lessened a bit because parents of three of my friends also decided to send their kids. So the four of us trooped off, not speaking a word of French, and went off to French boarding school. So I went to the French school. I did my high school there, my college there. And when I graduated, I spoke French. Well, I spoke French Canadian. I'll have to emphasize that.
Yes.
And that's a different language. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know what to do. So my father said, well, why don't you go study in Europe? So off I trotted, and I went to Fribourg in Switzerland, because I wanted to study there. There was a very famous Dominican priest who was an expert in communism, a chap by the name of Father Bohinski. And so I went there and studied there and started learning German. And I went there from there to Munich and considered and studied there in business. And then my father decided that, or offered me the chance to take a look at the publishing business, which he had done. He had started a business like that in Canada. And I spent a year in Germany then, going with the Herder Verlag, which is a large publishing house in Germany, because the idea was that perhaps I would take over the business. So that convinced me. No, I didn't like that business. So I decided to go back to Canada, by which time I had married. And I went back to Canada and got my chartered accountant, or my CPA. And we, at that time, had two small children, who were Nikki and Gabi. And Brigitte reminded me of the promise I had made years before that we would then travel. Each time I was more or less keen on that because I had started my profession. But I put out the word that I was available, and I had those offers from a number of companies to go to work in Latin America. I wanted to learn Spanish, and we were interested in that. So I had offers from a number of countries, one of them from Brazil. And just to show you my great education, I was interviewed by the chief personnel officer of Price Waterhouse from Brazil. And he offered me the job, and I said, I'd be interested. He said, on top of that, we will pay for your Portuguese lessons. I said, what do you mean Portuguese? I don't want Portuguese. I want to learn Spanish. I didn't even know they spoke Portuguese in Brazil. But I accepted an offer in Venezuela. And we went down to Venezuela and settled there for 3 years. And it was great. I mean, I was a CPA, but very young, but all of a sudden I was put into very higher positions than I was back home. I was earning much more money, living a great life. Big house, maid, good weather, swimming pool, country club, the whole expat thing. And after 2.5, 3 years, we sat down and we decided that we needed to make a decision, because that is where the expat thing came in. That we felt that if we didn't get out of this rut of being wonderfully well off as expats, we would have a horrible time ever reintegrating back into what we would call our normal life. So we decided to pack it in, and it was hard. And I accepted a job with the same company, with Price Waterhouse in Dusseldorf. And off we trotted to Dusseldorf in the middle of November. Cold, dark Germany after 3 years in the sun of Venezuela. It was hard, but we needed to do that to break, to get back into, quote, back into our normal type of life. That led me then to accepting a year later a job with the World Bank. And off we trotted again, this time off to Washington, D.C., by which time we had 3 children. And our son at that time, Nicholas, was about probably 7 or 8. He came to me one day, he said, "Dad, I'm very upset with all this." He said, "Every time I get to go to a new school and get new friends, you pack up and leave. I don't like that. It's hard. It's hard on the kids to do that." Right? So that was my commitment when we moved to Washington. I would do the traveling. We'd settle in that area of Washington. We did. We lived in Virginia. Kids grew up there, went to high school there. But when high school was ending, each one of them was offered or forced into taking 1 year abroad. And they all went off to Europe. College, they all had to go to Canada because we felt that they needed to know where home was. I mean, the home concept of an expatriate is a very important one, especially for children. And we'd been living abroad almost all of their youth. So all of them went to college in Canada. And 2 of them settled in Canada and 1 settled in Texas. And then, then I retired from the bank in 2000, and we settled in Virginia. And then my wife died, and then I moved to Florida, and I've been in Florida for the last 5 years. That's in a nutshell what it is. Otherwise, everything's very normal.
It sounds incredible. It sounds really great, and I'm happy to have learned all this. I really had no idea. So how did you keep them feeling rooted to Canada? What was the connection other than just talking about Canada?
Well, the way we kept them connected was we kept a house in north of Montreal, about 100 miles north of Montreal. We have a house that's on a lake, which my father bought, a piece of land my father bought when I was, the year I was born, actually.
Okay.
And I then maintained that house during all of our years of traveling. And that was where, in the summer, we would always go. And for the kids over the years, I remember them walking into the house on the lake there and saying, "Oh, now we're in Canada." So that was the place where they felt at home and felt Canada. And that house still exists. And as a matter of fact, that's last weekend. They were all up there. There were 16 cousins were there.
Amazing.
So there's a number of other families related to us who are based also there in the summer. And so those kids have all grown up knowing all those 15 or 16 cousins. And that has kept them rooted there. Even Gabi, who's a Texan, has never missed in her whole life, and she's now, I don't know, close to 50. She has never missed a summer there. And she's trying very hard to inculcate into her children the same idea that LaBelle is a place, and it's a place in Canada. And the kids, her kids from Texas are talking about settling in Canada at that house. So very much that's how we kept them rooted. I think it's worked. And yeah. Gabi is still a Canadian, and the kids are also Canadian and American.
Yeah. It's a special place, LaBelle. So you've mentioned, I want to go back a bit to the years that you were all traveling as a family. You've mentioned some of the disadvantages. Like, can you look back and see how those experiences shaped their lives?
So that the open-mindedness is one thing. The other thing is probably the tolerance that comes with that, because you're used to people who are different. They're not used to one way, and they're all the same. They're different. I think the other thing that they have been given through that is that ability to move in different circles. I mean, they're comfortable because they've lived abroad, or they've lived with foreigners, and so being with foreigners doesn't bother them at all. The languages, that is one of the big advantages. Nick and my oldest and Tanya, the youngest, still speak very good German.
Yeah.
And that's come from that.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you think is relevant or interesting that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, I think my experience is that I think you need to make the distinction between an expat and immigrant, because I think that influences your attitude, right? The expat for me is somebody who's assigned to a temporary job, and most of my jobs have been that way. And nowhere along that way did I ever say, oh, I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. The expat basically is there doing the job, enjoying it, but knowing that that's only a temporary thing. The immigrant is the one like you, and in a way myself, who have taken the option of deciding that I'm going to stay in this country, which changes your attitude completely. Because as an expat, you're not necessarily, that open to adapting to the country, to learning the language, to learning the customs. If you're an immigrant, you are much more, because you are trying to adapt, and you're trying to live in a community and not necessarily always be a foreigner in that community. As an expat, you don't really care. So I think that's a big distinction, and that really influences how you feel towards the place you are living in.
I think I agree with you. The word expat is a complicated word, and it has some heavy, some connotations that maybe come with the word. But I think at the same time, it's a very gray area because it varies very much from person to person. A lot of the true expats that I met living in Istanbul, they were really only in Turkey for 3 or 4 years. And they'd been to another country that was not home before that, and they were going on to another country that was not home after that. But they really they had such a positive attitude towards learning Turkish and the Turkish culture, and they really enjoyed life in a really nice way. And a lot of the people I know who are, I don't know if they're immigrants, but they're definitely long-term staying, for example, in Turkey. They have such a fondness of the country. They have taken on so many aspects of the country, but yet home is often, not always, but is often still somewhere else. So I think it's a very complex sort of gray area with so many possibilities.
Yeah, I remember when I decided to go to Latin America, I had a very favorite uncle of mine. He was actually my father's brother, Uncle Henry. I don't know if you knew him. He advised me strongly not to be an expatriate, to not accept a job in Latin America. And his point was, if you become an expat, you then are out of circulation of the home base and you never get back in again. And his advice to me was stay in your career and climb up and become a partner in a firm. And I decided that was not what I wanted to do at that age. I wanted to go out and have the adventure. I wanted to go out and learn the language. I wanted to see the country. So that was why I think that's not for everybody to do. There is a certain amount of risk involved. You have no idea where you're going. You have no idea where and a lot of people don't like going to places where they can't speak. Learning a language is not everybody's cup of tea, because to learn a language, you have to actually go down to the level of a child for a while and not be able to say, this is metaphysically impossible. You can't say that. You can only say, can I please give a cup of tea? So, that in itself is something that hinders a lot of people from traveling. By going abroad, I actually opened the doors to what I was eventually to do, to have a good career in the World Bank, which was an awful lot of fun. But I would never have got that if I hadn't gone abroad in the first place.
And you couldn't have, I imagine, foreseen that path either. You had to take one step, the Venezuela step, then you had to take the Dusseldorf step. And you don't always, you can't plan several steps ahead. But thank you so much for your time. This has been really fun and very interesting and informative, and such a great perspective on things.
Good, nice to see you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with my Uncle Sander. If you did, please give it the thumbs up. And be sure not to miss any upcoming conversations by hitting the subscribe button. Until next time, bye.